A long overdue report by Baroness Louise Casey into Britain's grooming gang scandal was released today, laying bare a catastrophic failure by police, councils and social services to protect thousands of vulnerable young girls from systematic sexual abuse. The findings, announced by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper in the House of Commons, confirm what many have long suspected. Political correctness and institutional cowardice allowed predatory gangs, disproportionately composed of Asian and Pakistani men, to exploit children with impunity for over a decade. The Casey Review, described as damning by Cooper, reveals a litany of failures spanning from 2009 to 2025, with authorities repeatedly ignoring warnings about the abuse of predominantly white girls due to fears of being labelled racist. The report explicitly links grooming gangs to men of Pakistani origin, a fact that critics argue has been deliberately downplayed for years to avoid inflaming community tensions. Local data further indicates that a significant number of suspects are asylum seekers or non-UK nationals, fueling concerns about lax immigration policies contributing to the crisis.
Mr. Speaker, I warned in January that the data collection we had inherited from the previous government on ethnicity was completely inadequate. It was only collected on 37% of suspects. Baroness Casey's audit confirms that ethnicity data is not recorded for 2/3 of grooming gang perpetrators, and she says it is not good enough to support any statements about the ethnicity of group-based child sexual exploitation offenders at the national level. I agree with that conclusion, and frankly, it is ridiculous and helps no one that this basic information is not collected, especially when there have been warnings and recommendations stretching back 13 years about the woefully inadequate data on perpetrators, which prevents patterns of crime being understood and tackled. The immediate changes I announced in January to police recording practices are starting to improve the data, but we will need to go much further. Baroness Casey's audit examined local-level data in 3 police force areas, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, where high-profile cases involving Pakistani heritage men have long been investigated and reported, and there they found the suspects of group-based child sexual offences were disproportionately likely to be Asian men. She also found indications of disproportionality in serious case reviews. And while much more robust national data is needed, we cannot and must not shy away from these findings because, as Baroness Casey says, ignoring the issues, not examining and exposing them to the light, allows the criminality and depravity of a minority of men to be used to marginalise whole communities. The vast majority of people in our British, Asian and Pakistani heritage communities continue to be appalled by these terrible crimes and agree that the criminal minority of sick predators and perpetrators in every community must be dealt with robustly by the criminal law. Baroness Casey's review also identifies prosecutions and investigations into perpetrators who are white, British, European, African or Middle Eastern, just as Alexis Jay's inquiry concluded that all ethnicities and communities were involved in appalling child abuse crimes. So to provide accurate information to help tackle serious crimes, we will make it a formal requirement for the first time to collect both ethnicity and nationality data for all cases of child sexual abuse and exploitation, and we will commission new research into the cultural and social drivers of child sexual exploitation, misogyny and violence against women and girls, as Baroness Casey has recommended.
The report highlights deep-rooted institutional failures, including a shocking tendency to blame victims, some as young as 10, for the crimes committed against them. In many instances, cases were dropped or downgraded from grape to lesser charges because authorities claimed 13 to 15-year-old girls had consented to or were in love with their abusers. The Casey Review recommends tightening laws to ensure that any adult engaging in penetrative sex with a child under 16 faces mandatory grape charges, a move Cooper has vowed to implement. MP Naz Shah, who infamously liked and shared posts calling for children being abused by Pakistani grape gangs to shut up for the sake of diversity, took to address the House of Commons, making statements such as, "Those that display selective outrage or fan the flames to blame entire communities do nothing to protect the victims."
Naz Shah. you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first thank the Home Secretary for her statement and for her leadership and commitment to get a grip on this issue. As a Member of Parliament for one of the largest constituencies, Muslim and Pakistani heritage people, Muslims, I know the sheer anger and condemnation that the vast majority of them share, like all Britons, against those that commit these vile actions and vile sexual abuse. This is not only backed by recent polling by opinion that shows Muslims are deeply concerned, majority of them, about grooming gangs, but by sermons in mosques, letters from leading figures, demonstrations on the streets and so much more, often not given the media coverage that they deserve. I am pleased to see the National Crime Agency will be involved in the future inquiries, and let me reiterate in this House that British Muslims stand on the side of victims and support the full force of the law against all perpetrators of abuse. But would the Home Secretary agree with me that those that display selective outrage or fan the flames to blame entire communities do nothing to protect innocent victims or further the cause of victims?
Kemi Badenoch launched a scathing attack at both Labour and the Lib Dems, saying that they should be ashamed of themselves for voting against an inquiry 3 times.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's handling of this scandal is an extraordinary failure of leadership. His judgment has once again been found wanting. Since he became Prime Minister, he and the Home Secretary dismissed calls for an inquiry because they did not want to cause a stir. They accused those of us demanding justice for the victims of this scandal as, and I quote, jumping on a far-right bandwagon. A claim the Prime Minister's official spokesman restated this weekend. Shameful. It has been left to Conservatives time and time again to force this issue. 3 times, Mr. Speaker. 3 times. They can mutter now. They all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry. They voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote at all, asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, voted against. At committee stage of the crime and policing...
Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice has requested an apology from Home Secretary Yvette Cooper after initial demands for a national grooming gangs inquiry were dismissed by Sir Keir Starmer as far-right and misinformed. Speaking in the House of Commons after Cooper's announcement, Tice asked the Home Secretary, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Richard Tice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement from the Home Secretary and that there will now be a national inquiry. Does the Home Secretary think that that will be finished within, let's say, 2 years for the British people? And given that she quite rightly apologised to the victims and survivors, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Yeah. Well, he raises the issue about the timescale for this and the... in the discussions that we have had with Baroness Casey and also recognising the many issues that people want to raise with an inquiry, we had expected that it might take around 3 years. Clearly, if the Commission is able to work faster than that, then people will clearly want answers as swiftly as possible. But final details about the timings will obviously need to be determined. I think we do need to make sure that we are both implementing the recommendations of previous inquiries and also making sure that we are pursuing these further investigations in local areas as swiftly as possible. And I do reiterate in my statement earlier the recognition of the huge harm that has been done to victims and survivors through decades. And I would urge him to look at that section of Louise Casey's report with the 17 pages of failure year after year after year to follow through and to take action. And I do believe that victims and survivors are owed an apology for that failure over very many years.
The Casey report's 12 recommendations include better data collection, improved information sharing between agencies, and enhanced training for mental health staff in schools to identify at-risk children. However, for many, the findings are a grim reminder of a system that prioritised political correctness over the safety of vulnerable girls. We've lost more than a decade, Cooper admitted, a sentiment echoed by survivors who demand justice for years of neglect. As the nation awaits the results of the new inquiry, the message is clear. Those who failed Britain's children will have nowhere to hide. But for the thousands of victims, the question remains. Will justice finally be served, or is this just another chapter in a decades-long saga of betrayal?